Ladies and gentlemen, presented by the WZWA Network, it's the Insider's Edge Podcast with your host, Karlifornia.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Insider's Edge Podcast here on the WZWA Network. I'm your host with the most on the West Coast, Karlifornia in Fury. It's a joy to be with you all once again. And speaking of a joy right here, right now, I get to speak to a guy who I'm very interested in learning about his time in professional wrestling. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the one, this is the only Mr. Rico Casanova. How are you, sir?
Hey, how you doing, man? Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you again. I'm really excited to learn about your time in professional wrestling, sir. And the first question I ask on this show, as usual, is before you got involved in the wrestling business, how did you first become a fan of professional wrestling?
Well, you know, I grew up in Puerto Rico, and my grandfather and my dad were big wrestling fans. And my grandfather and my dad grew up in New York. So they were big fans of Bruno Sammartino, you know, watching the big old WWF back in those days. So when they moved to Puerto Rico, they started watching wrestling in Puerto Rico, which was Carlos Colon, Capital Sports Promotion in the early 70s. And so me watching with them every Saturday morning, watching the TV show, got me into becoming a wrestling fan since I was a little kid.
Right. That's amazing. I wasn't aware that you actually grew up in Puerto Rico as well. That's really cool. So I guess as a fan, you know, with your father and all that, did you get to go to any of the shows?
Oh yeah. So my dad, he every Saturday he used to take me to this stadium called Iran Bithorn, 15, 20,000 people packed. And that's why I actually got to see Andre the Giant and big stars like that that I used to go there. Ric Flair went by there as well. And what my dad used to do, he gets so excited from the wrestling show.
Oh, sorry, I think you might have accidentally muted yourself there.
You know, I always wanted to become a wrestler. Since I was a little kid. That's what I love doing.
Right, cool. So that's amazing. You got to see Andre the Giant and all that. That's just amazing. So okay, you're a fan all these years. At some point, you do want to get into the business. How did you go about figuring out how to get into the wrestling business?
So what happened was, you know, I never knew how to get into the wrestling business. So what happened was I joined the military real young at 17 years old because I became a father at 17. So at that age, I said, you know, I have to do something to take care of my child, right? So I joined the military, was in the Army for a few years, went to the war. I was in Desert Storm in 1991. And after I came back from the war, I was stationed in Fort Myer, Virginia, and the Honor Guard. And the Honor Guard is actually the unit, the most prestigious unit in the military, in the Army, that watches the president. Now, when you see the president coming down in the helicopter and you see the guys there watching him, or the Turmo de Unknown Soldier, that's the guys from the Honor Guard, right? So I was in that unit, and that was right outside Washington, D.C. I actually saw, I always watch wrestling, I told you. So I saw that there was a wrestling show in the Washington, D.C. Armory. So I decided to go watch it live. And when I'm going to the wrestling show, I see one of my soldiers. I was a sergeant back then. So I saw one of my own soldiers working security at the wrestling show. So I see my soldier walking Ric Flair, Sting, Brian Pillman, walking him to the ring and back, right? So I'm like, what? And that was a Saturday. I remember that was a Saturday night. Monday morning, we do PT in the unit, and I see him, and I call him over, and I say, hey, I saw you at the wrestling show Saturday. He's like, yes, Sergeant. I'm like, well, how'd you get to do that? And he told me he was going to a wrestling school. And I'm like, what? You know, I got the little light bulb go off, right? And I'm like, wrestling school? First time I ever heard of that. So he told me, yeah, the Monster Factory right here in Maryland, about 45 minutes away. And so I said, Tuesdays and Thursdays. That was a Monday. I said, oh, tomorrow I'm going with you. And that's how I started. That's how I started going to wrestling school. I went there and met Dwayne Gill. He was actually the instructor. He did Gilbert. I don't know if you know.
Yes.
And Axel Rotten was also there as well. And from that day on, I started training.
Wow, that's really cool. Yes, I've had Dwayne Gill on the show. He's a very, very nice man.
Yes, he is,
So
yeah.
wow, so what a whirlwind. And to be honest, like when you talk about how you're in Desert Storm, I've never really had the chance to speak to anyone that was, went to a war. That must have been
Right.
so frightening for someone at your age then to be doing something so confronting like that.
I was real young then. I was in my early 20s when I went to Desert Storm, and honestly, to be honest with you, you really don't at that age when you're so young, you really don't think about things like that, right? You really don't. And I find it that now at my age now is when the effects are starting to kick in, that all those things that happen to you, they you actually start to feel the effect now at my age. But when you're young like that, you're full of adrenaline, you're full of, excitement and you really don't think about it much. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
it's and to be honest with you, I have a lot of respect for the people that were in the World War I, World War II, in Vietnam. They actually, I believe, had a lot worse than I did, and I had to see what they had to go through. I think ours was a cakewalk compared to what they went through. You know what I mean? So it's I have a respect for those people.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing. So Monster Factory. I've had this training facility brought up many times over the last few years of doing this podcast. Can you tell me a little bit about the experience you had there and what you learned most from guys like Dwayne and Axel?
Well, the Monster Factory was owned by Pretty Boy Larry Sharp, and he had his in New Jersey, the main one, and Dwayne ran the one in Maryland, and it was a great experience. I remember it was a small class. It was about 6 of us, and we trained about 3 months before we actually got to get in the ring for the first time and actually in a real match, which was a battle royal. And I remember that battle royal. We had guys like Tommy Dreamer, Chris Candido, uh, this guy named the Spider, which became one of the headbangers, and it was a great experience, which I did not know. The initiation is when when your first match, you get chopped like 50 times, and your chest is all red and and I mean bleeding. But I enjoyed it. I had fun. I was like, oh my god, I couldn't wait to. When I got in the ring and did that, I knew that's what I wanted to do. It's like there was no doubt in my mind that was my calling. You know what I mean?
Very cool. So yeah, the first match was a 20-man battle royal. I believe my research is telling me here.
That's right. Yeah.
Awesome. I also, through my deep dive in research, found out about an experience you had a company in South Carolina called ACW. I
That's right.
believe you managed to become a champion there once, a United States champion or something along those lines. Is that correct?
That is correct. So when I was what happened was I got out of the military. So let me tell you how we got there.
Yep.
So when I was there training at the Monster Factory, I left the military. I said I want to get out the military. I want to do wrestling, full time. But I went back to Puerto Rico. So Dwayne Gill knew the booker in Puerto Rico, which was Dick Murdoch, was running the stuff there for Carlos Colon in Puerto Rico, and he gave him a call and said, "I have this guy that could do TV for you." So I went to Puerto Rico, and they had me train at their ring, and saw that I was, I passed, and so they had me do TV every Wednesday, just enhancement talent, right?
Yep.
And because I spoke English, I wrestled all the foreign guys. I'm talking about guys like Abdullah the Butcher, Akeem Mulumba, Killer Carl Wallace, Mr. Hughes, all big names that went through there. I wrestled as enhancement talent. I did that for about a year or so, and I decided to move to the States to because I have my family, I have my kids, right? So I wanted to try to look for a better job opportunity. Plus, I knew that in the Carolinas and the Charlotte area, WCW was starting out, and it was a big wrestling ground there, right? Proving up for wrestling. And my aunt was living right outside Charlotte, so I went to move to her in North Carolina, and I started training at Ivan Koloff's wrestling school. And I saw an independent show I went there and they liked how I wrestled. So they said, hey, come next week to this plane in Manning, South Carolina. So I went there, or Manning's North Carolina, one of those two, I can't remember. I know it's Manning. I just don't know if it was North or South Carolina.
Yeah.
And so I go there, it's ACW, and that's where I met Rob Van Dam for the first time. We did that, and this other guy named Chaz Rocco, Jimmy Jam Garvin, Dick Slater, Greg the Hammer Valentine. And so I get there and they say, oh, you're going to be a part of this 20-man battle royal. And there's 2 battle royals. The winner of each battle royal is going to wrestle each other. And then the winner of that is going to wrestle the United States champion. At that time, the United States champion was Jake the Snake Roberts. So here I'm thinking my first match with this company, I'm thinking I'll be in the battle royal, I'll be one of the first guys eliminated, you know what I mean? No, they tell me I'm gonna win the battle royal, then I'm gonna beat the other guy, and then I'm gonna wrestle Jake the Snake Roberts, right? Now I'm used to wrestling names, like I told you in WWE in Puerto Rico, all the big names came through there. I'm used to wrestling them, but not nobody like Jake the Snake Roberts, right? One of my idols. So but my main thing was that not that I was wrestling Jake the Snake Roberts, they told me I'm gonna win. So I beat Jake the Snake Roberts, but my main thing was, okay, then I have a phobia of snakes, right? So I knew that once the match was over, that I was gonna have the snake on me for one way or the other, right? Yeah. So I had to overcome that phobia in order to have the snake, put the snake on me and at the end of the match. And so that was, I wouldn't say me beating Jake the Snake Roberts was my biggest accomplishment, was having the snake on top of me. That's probably my biggest accomplishment.
I can imagine that would scare me shitless as well. Another thing I found really interesting is the 20th of December in 1996. There happens to be a situation where Sid Vicious is supposed to be facing Duke the Dumpster Droese, who does not make the show. In some random twist of fate. I've done my homework. This random twist of fate, somehow you are put on this show. I believe it's a co-promoted show with the WWF and the WWA. And you end up working with Sid Vicious in this show in Puerto Rico. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
That's correct. So I was in the first match at that show, and the booker in that show was actually Dutch Mantel. And it was a show because Savio Vega in that time was in WWF, so he opened up a promotion in Puerto Rico, WWA, and being he was at WWF at the time, he did joint shows in Puerto Rico. So he brought down Sid Justice at the time. He was a WWF champion, and he was supposed to defend the title against Duke the Dumpster Droese, and for some reason he's flat out of Miami, he missed it or something, he didn't make it. And he was so he loved the way he watched me work in the first match, and he said, "Oh, I just met the Puerto Rican Shawn Michaels," and so he wanted to wrestle me. So he actually chose me, handpicked me to wrestle me, and defended the WWF title against me in that show.
That's crazy, isn't that crazy?
Hey, tell me about it. The match didn't last too long, but I was happy. You know what I mean?
I'd be happy too. So again, your career's moving along there through the 90s. You're working a bit in Florida, you're working a bit in Puerto Rico, of course. I know that there's a time though where some problems with your kidneys took you away from professional wrestling for a little bit. How was it that you were able to finally come back from that?
So in between Florida, Puerto Rico, I had lived in New Jersey for about 1.5 years, 2 years, and I did a lot of wrestling there, and teamed up with a guy named Mike Busey, which is known as Supernova, which was Simon Dean in WWE, and we did a lot of wrestling there, New Jack City Wrestling, and a lot of other promotions, and I actually was going to have my ECW WWE tryout right next to each other, right. And when I was going to do that, I trained a lot playing basketball. I used to be a real good, basketball player. I was a decent basketball player. And that's how I always had my cardio, playing basketball all the time, pickup games and stuff like that. So I twisted my ankle, like the Thursday. I was supposed to have my tryout like on a Monday, and Thursday I twisted my ankle. So I'm like, oh my God, what luck I got. So I went to the emergency room, and when they did all these tests on me, they said my blood pressure was high, and I was always a healthy guy, you know. So when they did blood work on me, they found out something wrong with my kidneys. So anyway, make a long story short, they had to do a biopsy on me, and they did this whole thing. So Desert Storm, the chemicals from the war in Desert Storm actually damaged my kidneys.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I had to right after my match with Sid Vicious, you know, I went to Puerto Rico. You know, from New Jersey, I went back to Puerto Rico. I had to, you know, wrestle, did all that. Had the match with Sid Justice. And right after that, about 3 months after that match, and I remember Dave Hebner at that show was going to call Vince McMahon to let him know that, you know, they found somebody, you know, a Spanish guy that speaks English. You know what I mean? I was going to be part of, I would have fit good in with the Attitude Era. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But I had to go on dialysis. 3 months after that, I was on dialysis. So I lost my chance to do that. I was on dialysis for about 1.5 years. I thought my wrestling career was over, right? Because, you know, you never heard anybody with a transplant or anything wrestle again. You know what I mean? That on any sport whatsoever. But I had my kidney transplant in April of 1999. After that, I moved to Florida. Then I moved permanently here to Florida, where I'm at now, to Orlando. And there was a wrestling school nearby. This is maybe 6 months after my surgery. And so I said, well, if I can't wrestle, I can at least help train guys, you know, help them do what I can, or maybe even as a manager, you know what I mean? Just maybe be ringside, right? And I do that. And then I remember I was at the wrestling school one day, and I was in the ring by myself, right? Just standing in the middle of the ring. And I looked down, I'm like, I wonder what would happen if I took a bump right here. Like, what took a bump, you know? So I just took a bump. Without thinking, I just took the bump. I just stood there and thought about it. I'm like, not bad. I mean, you don't feel bad. I stood up again. I did it again. So that's when I said, why not? Why not wrestle again? Who says you can't wrestle after having a kidney transplant, right? And at that time, there was a basketball player named Sean Elliott for the San Antonio Spurs that had just had a kidney transplant, and he was going to try to play basketball after his kidney transplant, right? So I'm thinking to myself, before he plays basketball, I'm gonna beat him to it. I'm gonna be the first athlete to come back after a kidney transplant.
Yeah.
So lo and behold, I did that. I'm the first pro wrestler or athlete in the world ever to wrestle or participate in a sport with a kidney transplant. So I did it before Sean Elliott and anybody. I'm the first one officially to do it. So I did it, and I did that for a few years. They had told me when I got my transplant that he could come back, you know, with the thing from Desert Storm, that it could come back because it was only my 50% compatibility, the transplant, you know what I mean? And but during that time, I wrestled in WWC full time, 5 days a week for like 3 years. I did that, and then I had to go on dialysis again after 5 years. My kidney failed, so I went on dialysis again for 3 years, and then I got my transplant, and then that one lasted me for 13 years. And but I might be going ahead of you, so you might have some more questions for me. So I might be jumping ahead.
No, that's okay. That's amazing that you were able to come back from something so serious, not once but twice. So wow, what a great story. And
the first one in the world to do it with one kidney transplant, and the first one also to do it with 2 kidney transplants.
So you got both records. That's fantastic. So okay, so you were able to come back and wrestle full time, 5 days a week. I know that you've been you've portrayed quite a good heel over the years. Especially when you're wrestling in Puerto Rico, you're performing in Puerto Rico. Have you got any stories of any scary moments with the audience there? Because when I had Savio Vega on the show, he told me some really wild stories. So has that happened to you over the years?
Listen, I was at a match with Conan. You know Conan?
Yeah.
He hit Carlos Colon's daughter Stacy over the head with a guitar. He was supposed to, he was serenading her, with the mariachi. He had mariachis, serenading her. Like he was gonna propose, and he just took the guitar and busted her over the head with it. She was bleeding and everything, Carlos Colon's daughter, Fans, you don't mess with Carlos Colon's daughter, right? Listen, it's in Humacao, Puerto Rico. The town was called Humacao, Puerto Rico. He runs into the dressing room. I tell you what, talk about scared shitless. The crowd was trying to bang the door open, like knock the door down to get out of in the dressing room. They had to call the SWAT. The police had to come and put a line like this to have us go in between them to take us out of safety to the cars, to get out of the building. I mean, that was the scariest I've ever been in my life. I mean, worse than Desert Storm, trust me. Worse than that. Oh yeah.
Wow, what an angle.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Awesome.
The funny thing is, to see the video of celebration in the dressing room, I'm the first one like jumping, celebrating, right next to Conan and them. But yeah, it wasn't funny when they was trying to knock the door down, the fans. It was crazy.
I love stuff like that. That's awesome. Another place that I've seen that you'd worked a little bit. I've interviewed quite a lot of guys that wrestled for this company, IPW Hardcore. They're in Florida, run by my friend Mr. Ron Nemi.
Ron Nemi, yeah.
Tell me a little bit about working there and your experience there and the Florida scene at the time.
Well, listen, I would say IPW Hardcore was probably the ECW of Florida.
Mm.
And the talent that went through there was, I mean, bar none, the best. I mean, that's why I met AJ Styles. You had the Black Nation Boy, Scoot Andrews. You had Mike Sullivan. I mean, you had Frankie Caiazzo or Frankie Capone. I mean, the talent there, Bruce Santee. I mean, I wrestled there. I mean, me and this guy, the Bug, we would call the Bug, Spanish Fly was our tag team name. Wrestled guys called Halo 13, Live Wire Injustice. I mean, we had great matches. I mean, just the talent that went through that company was just so unreal. I mean, the shows were just great. I mean, I love working for those guys. Those guys are all great. Rajak Strong got his start there as well at IPW Hardcore. I mean, a lot of good wrestlers came through there.
Yes, it certainly seems like a company that doesn't get talked about enough, considering how many big names came through there, and and now big names that you know of on television today. So yeah, I just want to ask a little bit about that because I think it's important to sing the praise of the company. So again, going back to the World Wrestling Council and your time there, I just wanted to ask you a little bit about what were some of your proudest moments working there for that company? Any sort of feuds or angles or stories that were told that you were part of that you look back upon fondly?
Well, actually, I mean, this Saturday I was with Eddie Colon, Primo Colon, and we was just shooting the shit. We had lunch together, remembering that, yeah, we've known each other 22, 23 years. I actually can say that I have a hand in helping build his character, or building, in the wrestling business, help him out when he was a young kid, 18, 19 years old, me and him were just talking about that, and we have that respect for each other. I don't know if you know, I have my own wrestling company in Dominican Republic now, Dominican Wrestling Entertainment. And speaking of Savio Vega, I'm actually wrestling Savio on the 15th of October on an anniversary show. So that should be interesting. That should be good. But yeah, so Eddie, helping Eddie Colon, helping bring him up in wrestling. And then he wrestled guys like Rey Mysterio and things like that. And now to be who he is today, I'm proud of that. I have great friends like Pablo Marquez, that he was an ECW original. Yep. And he was in WWE as well. And guys like that, we wrestle a lot also in the World Wrestling Council. And who else? Brent Dale was in Puerto Rico. We had a great match at an anniversary show there. I mean, and managing guys like Scott Hall, Razor Ramon, Apollo, that's like my brother, a friend of mine for years. I've had the proud, I can say proudly that I've been able to be part of that too as well, and actually be in matches with Abdullah the Butcher and Carlos Colon and stars like Chiqui Star, and Hugo Sabinovich. I mean, just the list is endless, and I'm actually thinking about it now that you're saying it. It's like, just, say, man, I've done that. You know what I mean? It's pretty cool.
Absolutely. Like when you look back, you should be so proud of what you've been able to accomplish and who you've been able to work with and work for. I mean, just with the names that you're listing off there, it really seems almost surreal. If I were you, I'd feel like it's surreal.
Listen, my happiest moment is in New Jersey. I got to wrestle my idol, was Jimmy Superfly Snuka.
Really?
So back in the early, about 94, 95, I got to wrestle Jimmy Superfly Snuka in Asbury Park, New Jersey. And that was like my biggest, like, oh my God, I'm wrestling Jimmy Superfly Snuka. Even bigger than Jake the Snake, because Jimmy Superfly Snuka was my, he was my number one guy.
Right. Did you take the splash?
Huh?
Did you take the big splash?
Of course I took the splash. As a matter of fact, well, he missed the splash because this one thing about me that, I had to go over right on him. But I'm the kind of guy, I'm beating Jimmy Superfly. Come on, man. No, man, I can't beat Jimmy Superfly Snuka. That was me back then, you know what I mean? I can't beat Jimmy Superfly Snuka. That's Jimmy Superfly Snuka. You know what I mean? Yeah. No. But it is what it is, right? Just like same thing with Jake the Snake. I didn't want to be Jake the Snake. I'm like, what? What? You know what I mean? But I guess that's their job now, right? To pass the torch, right?
That's it. So I did also notice in my research at one stage you were the IWA Caribbean Heavyweight Champion. Seems to be, out of the titles that you won over the years, that might be, maybe perhaps the most prestigious. So you could correct me if I'm wrong, but being bestowed, the top spot in a wrestling company like that, how did that make you feel?
Well, at that time I was on a roll, like we call it. I had 3 titles at one time. I was a world champion in War of Ecuador, a company in Ecuador called War.
Yeah.
I was their world champion. I was a world champion in Dominican Republic, and then I was the Caribbean champion in IWA. So I had those 3 titles at the same time. So that was a time for me. And I took advantage, and I took a trip to Cuba. I actually went to Cuba, and I said to myself, I have never seen ever anybody do a wrestling promo from Cuba. Have you ever seen one?
No.
So I went to Cuba, to Havana. They have a Christ there. They have a Christ statue.
Yeah.
And I went and actually did a wrestling promo in Havana, Cuba. Took a video of it and everything, and it's on YouTube. So as a Caribbean champion, I'm like, I'm the champion of the Caribbean. Cuba is part of the Caribbean. So I went and did a wrestling promo in Cuba. So I think that's also another first for me. So I'm the first one to do that too.
That's really cool. I did not know. I did my best with my research here. I did not know that you held 3 championships from 3 different countries, 3 world championships. That is. That's quite awesome. So I wanted to ask about Dominican Wrestling Entertainment. I believe that you're the president of the company. Please tell me and everyone out there who's watching this a little bit about this wrestling company.
Well, I started the company in 2008. I'm an accountant by trade. I went to college. I'm an accountant, and so I had an accounting business here in Orlando, and I came across a guy that his father used to be a referee for a big company in Dominican Republic for Jack Veneno, and that there was no more wrestling. It was gone. They extinct, like just from one day to another. Wrestling stopped in Dominican Republic, right? For years. So I mean, there was some shows here and there, but not like before. You know what I mean? So I talked to him and I say, hey man, what? There's a whole bunch of wrestling companies in Puerto Rico, and Puerto Rico's a lot smaller than Dominican Republic. So let's do one. Let's open another one up in Dominican. Let's open one up there. And he's like, I don't know. So I knew he was traveling there, and I said to myself, huh. So I booked the flight, the same flight he was on. And I went to DR when we got there. The same day he got there, I went to whatever the office is called, where you're at, but the State Department office, and I registered the name for the company right then and there. I said, from that day on, I said, we're going to start the wrestling company. I made him do it. He didn't want to, but I made him do it. He backed out of it later, so it's just me now. But so from that day on, I said, and then he showed me people, and there was this legend there. His name was Relámpago Hernández. He was like he was like the Roddy Piper of Dominican Republic, right? And so he took me around and showed me, you know, some of the old wrestlers, some new guys that were trying to train and things like that. And we got going. That's how we started doing DWE little by little.
Right, cool. So you said that the company was started in 2008 and it's still going today. Right.
Yeah.
Very cool. So as you mentioned, you'll be wrestling Savio Vega in October. Because I was doing as much research as I could. I couldn't find a lot on what might have been your final match or final match to this date. Are you still wrestling quite regularly?
No, I haven't had a match in 7 years. So that's one of the things I settled as president of the company, right? I stopped wrestling, one, because, you know, my health condition, you know, because I am on dialysis, right? So I'm gonna risk it all to wrestle Savio that day. I'm actually in training. We're going to the gym. Apollo's son, he's like my nephew, Apollo Jr. I'm training with him a little bit and getting in the ring again. But I haven't had a match in 7 years. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. Wrestling somebody like Savio Vega is not going to be easy at all. So it's going to be, it's going to be something.
Wonderful. I'm looking forward to finding out how that all goes. And this has been so fun, Rico, to learn about your time in professional wrestling. I've really enjoyed my time with you here. Is there anything that you would like to say to any of your fans out there, or anything that you would like to plug for whoever's watching this right now?
Sure. I want everybody, they could follow us on our YouTube page, is DWE Lucha, DWELUCHA. You can find us there, and you'll see our wrestling shows on there. We always post them up within a week after having it. So the whole show is on there complete. They can watch. And just follow us on Instagram. Same thing, DWE Lucha. And on Facebook as well. And I appreciate you having me here today. And I tell everybody watching, don't hate me because I'm beautiful. Hate me because I'm better than you.
Very cool, Rico. And all that information, everyone, I will put on the description in here on YouTube. So please check out DWE, and all the links will be there. But now we're getting quite close to the end of the interview here, Rico. But I've got to find out about your favorite things before we send off into the sunset here today. Okay. The first one here, Rico, is, who is your favorite professional wrestler of all time?
Shawn Michaels.
Excellent choice. Do you have a favorite opponent over the course of your career?
His name is Dr. Hertz. He's an independent guy from New Jersey. He's also one of my best friends. And anytime we get in the ring together, it's like we click. Him and Livewire. There's another guy named Livewire from Puerto Rico. I would say those are two of my favorite wrestlers, opponents.
Very cool. When you look back on your career, is there one match that you think to yourself, you know what, that's my favorite one that I ever performed in?
You know, I wrestled Brent Dale at anniversary show in WWC, and in a match that the loser has to wear a dress.
I read about that. Yeah.
And I would have to say, because it was an anniversary show, like the WrestleMania of WWC, and the match is, I will say, will have to be a perfect match from beginning to end. So I will have to say that would be my favorite match.
Very cool. Getting away from wrestling now, do you have a favorite book?
I'm actually reading Ring of Temptations by Hugo Sabinovich.
Oh.
I like reading a lot of bibliographies, and I like reading a lot of the wrestlers' bibliographies and presidents of the United States. I'm a big reading bibliographies. So I read the first 4 presidents, all the bibliographies, and I like reading a lot of I've read Mick Foley's, Ric Flair's. I've read Hugo's books I'm reading now, so I'm big on books like that.
Yeah, cool. I'm into that as well. Do you have a favorite TV show?
I'm a big science fiction guy, so I like watching what's the TV show I'm watching? I like watching like CSI, things like that. You know what I mean? I like watching CSI. But I watch a lot of Netflix series. Like I'm a big Star Wars guy. So
Cool.
I'm a big, I'm a big Star Wars nerd. So anything Star Wars spin-off or Marvel, like Invasion or Boba Fett or Obi-Wan Kenobi, I watch all that stuff.
Awesome, awesome. Do you have a favorite film?
Star Wars. Star Wars is my
Excellent.
favorite film of all time. That's like, I mean, Star Wars here and everything else down here.
That's cool. Do you have a favorite musical artist or favorite band?
I'm a Spanish guy, Latin music. So Mark Anthony is
Yep.
my favorite artist, and Air Supply will be my favorite band.
Very nice
They're from
choice.
Australia, right? They're
Of
from
course.
Australia, aren't they?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. Yeah, they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Getting away from the arts now, do you have a favorite food?
Lasagna. I
Very
like
good.
pasta. I like Italian food. And I can make it real good too. I cook lasagna pretty good too. But lasagna is my favorite a meal, and of course, and Spanish food, of course, rice and beans and things like that.
Delicious. Do you have a favorite place to eat on the road?
I like eating at Chili's, like Chili's.
Okay.
That's like restaurant. I don't know if you have that over there, but it's Chili's restaurant. It's like that, or like a steakhouse, something that has, I'm a meat guy. I'm a meat and potatoes guy, so I like eating on the roast stuff like that.
Yeah, very good. I'm quite the same. But we don't have chilies over here, unfortunately. Australia, we don't have a lot of what you guys get over on the other side of the world, unfortunately. But that's okay. We got three.
How's the wrestling scene over there? How's the wrestling scene over there in Australia?
Oh, the wrestling scene, it's not too bad. We've got a few companies around the country, but I would say as far as like being able to make a living as a wrestler over here, you wouldn't be able to do it because they probably only get to put on a show maybe once every 6 to 8 weeks.
Okay, I got you.
Unfortunately, but that's why a lot of the good wrestlers end up moving.
I know there's a guy who used to be called Jim Barnett. He used to do a lot of wrestling tours in Australia, correct?
That's right. Yes, over east, I believe the company.
Long time ago. I know that. Yeah.
Of course, yeah. It was called World Championship Wrestling, believe it or not.
Right. Right.
Anyway, we've got 3 to go here, Rico. Do you have a favorite alcoholic beverage? And if you don't drink, just a favorite beverage in general.
I don't drink alcohol. I never liked the taste of it. Yep. But Bailey's, I don't know if you know what Bailey's is.
Yes.
It's like kind of like a sweetie drink. I could pass that one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I like Bailey's. Second last one here. It's I guess could be considered a naughty one, but it can have a very meaningful answer as well sometimes, Rico. Favorite female body part or favorite female body attribute. What would you go with?
I would have to say her butt, the butt. I gotta have a nice looking round butt.
Very cool. By the way, Mr. Don Morocco also gave me the answer of butt. So you're in good company there. And the final one here, Rico, I don't believe you said one curse word throughout this interview, but the final one is supposed to be favorite curse word.
Shit. Oh shit. That'll be my favorite one, yeah.
Excellent. Rico Casanova, this has been such a joy to have the opportunity to talk to you, learn about your career, all the amazing things that you've accomplished in your life. So again, I want to thank you so much for your time. And, I know that there's probably so many more stories that we didn't get to uncover through this interview. So hopefully one day I can have you back on the show.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Thank you to everybody down under.
No worries, Rico. Thank you very much. And thank all of you for joining us here on the Insider's Edge podcast here. I'm Karlifornia. This is my new friend, Rico Casanova. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you down the road. Thank you.
And no chance in hell. I thought you'd ever see Vinnie Mac and Shane O'Mac here in All Elite Wrestling. And Vince McMahon looked like he might have shaved his eyebrows. Network, that's the way we play. Good God Almighty. Network, that's the way we play. Get puppies. Network, that's the way we play. Get.
The following announcement has been paid for by the WZWA Network.